hit the record button. I just got to say, I love Zoom. It started recording instantly. I used to have a WebEx that took about 5 minutes to record, and nobody talked. Now we can start talking again. All right, welcome everybody. We're glad to have you here. We're going to go ahead and start the ball rolling. We want to make sure we give Mike as much time as possible. So hopefully you're here for Mike Ackerbauer presenting Understanding the Keys to Breakthrough Teams, a virtual meetup. It's going to be an exciting conversation today. We'll go through a few little housekeeping things as we go forward. First of all, I want to point your attention to slido.com. You can go to that on your phone, on your web browser, however you want to. Coaching Agile Journey, CAJ017 is our code. Got a question up there right now, so you can answer that question. It's a poll. We can get an idea of who all's here with us, and then we'll use that for our Q&A as we go forward. So who are we as Coaching Agile Journeys? We are right now just a group of volunteers that came together. We're passionate Agilists, and we found out it's a lot more fun to do Agile together as we're experiencing in our journeys. And so what we are here for is to bring information that we find interesting and relevant and that we believe the community at large will get some value from. And so our hope is that you find some great value from this, you share it, you come back for other topics. If you have any suggestions for speakers, future topics, or want to get engaged with us, please connect with us at our website, coachingagilejourneys.com. And at the end, we'll have some more information like that. But hopefully you get connected with us and you get some value out of this, because we're all on a journey, right? None of us have arrived. We're all heading somewhere. And so hopefully you have a community that you're involved with, and hopefully you get involved with our community. So we're glad you're here today.
Yeah, we're going to change also.
Yeah. Yes, it changes a lot.
So also I just want to mention that I posted this section on Agile Orlando Meetup Group. So I see some of you on there from Agile Orlando Meetup Group. So thanks for attending. Really appreciate it. About 20 people signed up.
That's awesome. Hello, Agile Orlando. That's excellent. Glad you guys are here. Heidi, would you like to talk about Scrum Do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm here to talk about our sponsor, Scrum Do. Scrum Do is actually a really affordable tool, and it has built-in support for SAFe, portfolio level Kanban and planning boards, integrates with Slack. What more can you ask for? One of my favorite tools. And talks about risk management. But my favorite thing that's not mentioned here is just that it's got a team happiness meter where you can have your teams respond to their emotions. And so that's kind of a cool thing too. So you can try it free at scrumdo.com.
I love it. Thank you. Yes. A lot of really cool tool. I like the tool itself. So I think that is, let's go here. Yeah, that's our next one. So excellent. Well, Mike, listen, we are really happy to have you here. We're excited for your topic. And so without too much further ado, I'll say, go ahead and take the share, and we're going to unmute and listen. And I'll just remind everybody, go to slido.com, Coaching Agile Journey 017, or you can jump in the chat box and we will be monitoring that during Mike's talk.
Yeah, you can also, can't they ask their own questions in slido.com? And then people can vote up your question. So if you have a question, ask it in Slido if you feel like not answering in the chat. And then other people can vote up your questions. So we will be answering those questions first, that more people want to hear the answer. So keep that slido.com open and check it out. It's really a cool addition to what we're doing.
Excellent. All right. Well, Mike, it's all yours.
Can you stop sharing, Isaac?
Okay. Can you see me?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So I'm going into full screen share mode, so I will not be able to see any questions. So Heidi, Isaac, Lori, feel free to interrupt me. Thanks for the time. I'm really excited to do this. I'm Mike Ackerbauer. I'm with IBM. I am a Whole Team Evangelist, and that just means that I try and help people inside the company learn Agile and really cool tools to support modern practices. I started with IBM in 1998. I discovered really quickly that I was falling more in love with developing the people who develop technology than developing the technology myself. And so it's been a journey for almost 20 years of understanding what is leadership and what is, mostly my focus is what is innovation and how can we as teams of people, groups of people be innovative. In about 2006, IBM launched a campaign that we were the innovator's innovator, and they told everybody in the company, You are an IBM innovator, and I've been asking this question ever since. If that's true, which I believe it is, do you know how to innovate? And at the time we didn't have Watson, we had Deep Blue, and I was not part of that project. And I thought, well, what am I doing that's innovative? Well, one of the keys to breakthrough teams is understanding what the building blocks of innovation are and how you can apply them to your team for a breakthrough. So this is the question I want to focus on today: is how do self-directed teams collaborate and communicate to breakthrough when solving work problems? And you need to understand, and I think everybody would agree, that people get hired into companies to work on teams to help solve specific kinds of problems for the company's customers or for internal customers. So how do you do that well to the place where we would say, wow, we really delighted the user, the customer. We broke through to something exceptional that we didn't anticipate. So the first key to that is understanding, having a shared understanding, is understanding what your shared understanding is as a team. Perhaps you're familiar with Jeff Patton. I'm borrowing his graphics here and his model. Everybody says, wow, we really understand each other. This is great. And we're all thinking of something different. And then we start talking about it and putting stuff out on the table or whiteboarding and discussing, and we go, oh, wait a minute. Maybe we don't really understand each other yet or what we're trying to accomplish. And this is not uncommon, right, for teams? And I wonder, show of hands for the 5 people I can see on camera, how many of you reached shared understanding and said, good, we're done, we can move forward? It's kind of an ongoing process, right? It's a never-ending journey to get shared understanding. And I look at it this way: when we're looking to solve problems as a team, we have to solve the problem of what does it mean to be a team. So the one question we have to understand is, what are we doing here? What's our purpose? What's our mission? What's our core reason for being a team? That speaks to shared goals. And how will we work together to achieve those goals, to achieve that mission, to solve problems together that the company said that's why you're here? So in order to be a breakthrough team, the first thing you have to understand is, how do we actually function and why? And Patton would say, well, we haven't gotten there yet. There's a personality aspect here. And I just borrowed this from Harvard Business Review. It was an article that came up within the last few weeks. And I thought, man, it really does have all to do with the person, doesn't it? Or the people on your team. I don't trigger as much as some on the notion of being a resource or an asset, because I take that as a compliment. If I'm here and you're looking at me as an asset, that's a good thing. If you no longer see me as an asset, that's probably not so good. So to me, our natural resource on teams is our people. And I believe that innovation is born out of the team dynamic. So the personality type you have and your team, you have to understand that. We'll get into that a lot more soon. But that speaks to how you work as a team. So eventually you come to this place where you go, wow, we really worked through it. We have some sense of understanding, clarity of outcome. It could be just, okay, this is what we do and this is why we're here. And now we're committing to work together to that end. So feel free to interrupt me with questions as we go, if there are any, if they pop up. So 1 is shared understanding. 2 is understanding the process for group innovative thinking. I call it breakthrough thinking. And I look at it as very core to any team, but also any individual. And so I'm going to give you a quiz, and I hope you all studied. Anybody feel free to jump in here. If I come to you and I say, we've just gone through our stand-up, we've talked about what we're working on, I come to you and I say, I've got a blocker, here's what it is. Or excuse me, I have a blocker, I need your help. What's your first response? Anybody jump in.
Tell me a little more about your blocker, Mike.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. That's right. Okay, I want some context. I want some background. I might want some data. I might want to understand who got us here and who do we need to throw into the bus. Not really, but we want to know what brought us to this place where there's this gap between desired future state and current reality. What is that about? Okay, I would call that clarification. Let's clarify, what are we doing here? And how do we get to this place where we're blocked? Great. Now let's say Michael or anyone else, Michael will play along, I appreciate it, but anybody else, we have a sense of the scope of the issue for now. We go, okay, I understand what you want to do or what's wrong. Where do you go from there? Anybody, just shout it right out, unless you know the answer. Go ahead, Michael. You're not shy. I brought a ringer with me, by the way.
No, it's not so much a ringer. I'm letting other people jump first.
Anybody? I'm going to call names. Ready? Oh, I can't actually see names. Isaac, go ahead. Give him a hint.
Well, so you clarified, but now you've got to like somehow start to bring together, collaborate, get your ideas more. You can't just think of everything, right? So you've got to
Right.
generalize. Yeah.
Right. Some people would say, well, we'll come up with some options about how to bridge that gap between where we are and where we want to be. Fine. Okay. Some people call it brainstorming. That's a technique. That's not the model. That's not the framework. It's a way that you can get from here to there, is to come up with some thought, some novel thought, ideally around, well, what's separating us and what could we do in that space? And that's where creativity really lives, is when we go, well, I can make it free associations. I could know the code base or the problem space so well that I just know exactly why it's like that and what the remediation is. Whatever it is, it looks like people talking through, well, did you think of this? Could we try that? It could be conceptual, it could be very granular. We do usually refer to it as brainstorming. I did a blog one time. I have to resurrect it, actually. The title was, please don't call it brainstorming, because it's a trigger concept to many people. And anytime I go on LinkedIn or Twitter, more times than not, I'll see an article pop up from time to time that says, brainstorming is dead, use my brainstorming technique. So whatever you want to call it, it's this process by which we spend time thinking through, what could we do here and what does that look like? Now, if we were to go deep in this, I would tell you there's some very specific rules to brainstorming. The first one is, the cardinal rule is defer judgment. It means don't come up with the idea and then kill it right away with criticism, because then, when you brought up an idea and somebody criticized it to death, how many more ideas were you eager to bring forward? Right. Zippo. So you throw ideas out. No idea is a bad idea. We'll come to the place where we'll judge them, and we can be harsh at that point. We're at that point now. We've clarified the problem space. We have a good sense of the novel approaches we could take. Where do you go with those approaches? Anybody? You've got a series of ways you could address this challenge. What do you do next? I see people talking, but I hear them on mute.
Look for solutions.
Okay, excellent. That's absolutely right. Joel, what does that look like?
Finding a desired result that everyone can agree upon.
Okay, let's say you've got like 3 really good potential options. How do you figure out where do you go with them?
Well, I know in my industry, we always have to balance cost with timing.
Okay.
So we're an audiovisual project-based company, so we have to look at the customer's timeline. We have to look at the cost of materials. We have to consider a lot of factors when finding a solution.
Great. This is right in that space. I'm going to refer to it as developing a solution. So I've got some raw ideas, some high-level goal. In design thinking, we call it a hill. It could be, in Agile terms, an epic, or maybe even a little bit higher. It could be a release. Well, this is what we're going to do, and this is the value we're going to create with it. Well, that's fantastic. How does that look when we start to actually build it, when we start to bring it to a place where we could start working on something? And so, you've got to assess a lot of factors. You've got to, do we have time? Do we have money? Do we have resource of whatever sort that is? I was in consulting for a while before IBM, and we had a mantra: cheap, fast, and good, pick 2. So what are you optimizing for? Well, we need to know what the criteria are so we can be objective. Otherwise, we're just writing a pros and cons list, which I hate about as much as brainstorming, because it doesn't flesh out the nuance of the importance of why this outweighs that. And then it falls to somebody who outranks you to determine why or whether this idea goes forward or not. So developing a solution is selecting and strengthening the best ideas and starting to work on them until they're a little bit tangible, a little bit functional. This is where quality comes in, and sustainability in whatever it is you produce. It can get to prioritization, but it's kind of on the back end. So let's say we've got a plan. We've got a sense of, even if we don't, we'll just go with one plan. We've got a sense of what we're going to do. We've got a sense of how we're going to flesh it out. Where do you go with it? Bring us home, somebody.
Do.
I like experiment. You
Right.
know, try it. If it doesn't work, try something else.
Okay. We iterate. This is the point where we're beginning to iterate. Somebody said do, and I think that's a good alternative word to implement. Let's take the thing off paper. Let's bring it to life. Now, this is where the boundary gets a little interesting. I've taken these ideas, I've started to select and strengthen them. I've started to evaluate and optimize a little bit, played some sort of prioritization game to figure out where I'm going to go forward. Now I need to bring in some thought process to, well, what will it look like when we take it off paper? There's a blueprint, now we have to build it. Well, who do we need to bring in to help build it? You've got stakeholders, you've got customers, you've probably got a product owner. There will probably be somebody that says, no, not that, yes, or this, not that. This is kind of getting into your funnel management, but it's also just saying, okay, we're ready to start with something. So it's not just taking the plan and running with it. It's really breaking down some of the tasks, a little bit of the contingencies, and who do we need to bring into this to assist us, or who do we need to kind of work with ahead of time to keep from resisting what we're going to do. So really, this is typically where the innovation comes out. IBM's definition of innovation is the intersection of invention and business insight. Well, the invention is right about the time we're finishing up development. The insight is when you start to bring it to the marketplace or bring it to some reality. Some people who aren't really bought in or haven't really been immersed in it like you have. And now they're going, well, what did you think about this? And how do we move over here? And what about that blocker? So this is where I do like the term. This is a good time for reverse brainstorming. What did we miss? What could go wrong? What are all the ways this would have failed? And let's bring somebody in. And I was in system test when I first started in IBM. So my whole job was to find defects. Development hated us, but we loved it because we saved the company from releasing something with less quality. Well, this is almost the process within the process once you get into implementation. So, okay. So we clarify, we ideate, we develop, we implement. Now, you helped me define this model. Do any of these sound surprising to you? Or would you say, wow, I really don't agree with that? And I would welcome a debate, but that's not why I'm asking. What I posit here to you is we all have a native problem-solving language, and it's universal. And I'm using a specific set of language. You could call it something else. It could be plan, do, check, act. It could be observe, orient, do, act. Okay, wow, all right, good. It could be any number of ways that you could refer to it. In the original IBM design thinking model, and what triggered me on all this was when I was sitting in my first couple of design thinking sessions, and they said, here's our 4-step process in IBM design thinking. Understand, explore, prototype, and evaluate. Wow, they all kind of sound the same, don't they? Or at least very, very similar. So it isn't so much that I want to introduce new language and start a holy war about the semantics of the process. What I want to draw out here is there's a foundational set of things we all do all the time. They require unique mental skills or thinking modalities. You all have the capacity to do them, and it's an objective set of steps that we can look at and go, yes, it's here. And anytime we look at innovation, we'll see all of these in play to some degree. Okay, so 1, we're looking for shared understanding. 2, we need some sort of process that will help us be deliberate in how we produce something innovative, breakthrough, delightful. And I'm telling you that the frameworks we use, like Scrum, and Kanban, and Lean, and Agile, and design thinking, they all have this at their foundation. So this is really just reviewing what you already know, but at a deeper level. And because of that, you can look at whatever your process or framework is, or however you do your work, and say, wow, this lives underneath that. I want to understand this better, and maybe that will help me get better at whatever framework I'm using. So I'm going to break down what these building blocks look like just a little bit. So first, when we talk about clarification, we're talking about challenges and opportunities. We're talking about detail orientation. We're talking about being very crisp about what the scenario is, the context, the problem space. and there's a methodical approach to coming up with that information. And if taken too far, people who spend time in clarification can get locked down with, well, I need to know more. And you've probably heard the discussion point of, well, is 80% good enough to move forward? 80% of knowing versus 100% we don't get anything done. So there's a balancing point. There's tension to all this. That's part of the dynamic of the team. But understanding that clarification requires a ground level, detail-oriented, facts and figures kind of mindset is what really brings out the problem space you want to work on. I will eventually commit to memorizing the name of the guy who said, a problem well defined is half solved. So the more crisp I can be with the problem space, the more likely I can bring some innovative outcomes, some novel insight, and produce something that we hadn't thought of before. When we talk about generating ideas and ideation in general, it's almost the direct opposite of clarification. It's very conceptual. It's high level. It's big picture. What if we tried that? Have you thought about this? Let me tell you a story. I was walking down the aisle at Home Depot the other day, and I thought I saw this, and you're like, well, why is Mike mentioning that when we're talking about a financial problem? Well, I was just thinking, and there's free association there. There's a lot more of an abstraction potential. And in fact, people who are too intuitive to this approach, not only can they overlook details, but they might look like they're daydreaming. And so there has to be a really good tether to the problem space to go, well, where is that coming from? But if you're focused all day, every day on the facts and figures part, somebody comes in and says, hey, I was watching this movie and it really struck me that, and well, how does that associate with my problem? Well, there's opportunity there to see things another way that sometimes we may overlook. So you may or may not be free associative or intuitive this way. You may not come in with stories and ideas, but somebody could come in and throw a whole nother view or perspective at the problem space that changes everything. And however that works, everybody's capable of this. It's a question then of, well, how much are we willing to cultivate it and see where this really could take a challenge that otherwise is going to get solved the same old way. Third step, developing a solution. There's precision here, there's quality, there's sustainability. It looks like not only pluses and minuses, but looking at what are the things that would make this a strong idea or stronger, and what are the things we need to think about that maybe are being overlooked, or we might have a blind spot here that we need to consider. So there's comparison, there's analysis, there's evaluation. The creative oxygen for this step is time. Can we spend time paper prototyping, thinking about what it might look like, blueprinting it, just working through what could that be? Almost a modeling session, but let's evaluate it and really spend time breaking down what build a bridge looks like. We could build this feature. Great. Well, what's involved? This is in your backlog management. This is where you're starting to write out your tasks in a user story. It's really getting a sense of what are the nuts and bolts of what that feature or what that value is going to be. So we don't write feature stories. We write, right? We don't write a piece of code that runs a report like this. No, as an end user, I want to be able to see this. Great. Okay, what are all those things that have to happen for that idea or that story to be true? Finally, implementation. And whoever said do, this one's for you. I love this video. If you haven't seen this video, it's fantastic. I should put a link in the deck when I send it out. Implementation is about just getting stuff done. It's moving stuff forward. This is the rugby team in the Scrum model. Just do it. Move it. We like to see things happen. We like to bring it to life. We like to take that idea that's conceptual and do something that says, see, I made it happen. And of course, people with a lot of energy here, or people want to spend a lot of time here, or if your team is action oriented, you know that you could fly too fast. I work with a senior leader in my church who likes to ready, fire, aim. And so I tell everybody, as one of the senior leaders on his team, I tell people, he fires, I aim. Together, we might get somewhere, but one of us I could just aim, ready, aim. And he's like, boom, 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 boom. Okay, now it's out in the air, what do you do with it? So implementation is important and equally as crucial as coming up with the right problem space. And if you over focus on that, you could miss out on what was I really trying to accomplish. So far, so good. I've seen some chat happening, but I can't read it. But
Yeah, we're taking care of it.
any questions that I can answer?
You're good, Mike. This is excellent.
Okay. Okay, so first, we're looking at shared understanding. What is my team here for, and how will we work together to achieve it? 2 is, what's the process we're going to use? What is the intentional approach we're going to embody or employ so that as we're working in agile ways or in design thinking ways, what comes out is really valuable or novel or a breakthrough kind of result for the people that are consuming it. So here's the model, here's the framework. It is a process and it looks linear, which is always a problem when you show stuff like this, that it looks like it's end to end. And I clarified, now I don't have to. I think I'll come to that in the next slide. These are valuable for any team in any circumstance, whenever you're doing new planning, whenever you got a new new feature, a new product, a new idea for a project, or when you're running up against a blocker. It fits everywhere. But wait, there's more. Now how much would you pay? Okay, I guess I didn't put maybe it's coming. Third is you got to understand that within that process that is objective, remember we said early on around shared understanding, the team construct and the team dynamic hinges heavily on the people in the team, and it's because they have unique personalities. In fact, when we look at, if we modeled that and you said, wow, I really think that ideation sounds a lot like me and clarification doesn't sound like me and development sounds like me, what you'd see is if I did a chart of high or low, you'd start to see this kind of energy wave. And it's based on your personality type or mine that one or more of those elements of breakthrough thinking will resonate to a degree that differs from another. So I may spend a lot of time ideating because my personality type is ENTJ, well, I don't have to be the E. I'm drawing a blank. You know what I'm saying? Myers-Briggs. I may want to spend a lot of time somewhere, and you don't. It's very dependent on what aspect of that thought modality really resonates with me. So you can think of this as kind of an energy wave. And so some people will spend more time in some areas than others because their personality resonates with those characteristics of the step in the process. So what we're looking at next is I have a shared understanding of what my team does and how my team's going to accomplish it or how we're going to work together to do it. The process comes in as a foundational model for if we apply that deliberately, we will see some new kinds of outcomes that are really valuable to us. And then we have to factor in the personality that interacts with that process. So the process itself is objective. It's universal. It's a discrete set of steps. Anybody can do them anytime. But you and I have different energy levels for different steps in the process based on our personality types. And so that's very subjective. And that can change just as quickly as shared understanding goes away. So we have to understand that you and I and the rest of your team, we engage this process all the time, every day together, and yet we approach it differently. Now, if we don't know that these dynamics are in place, how might that look on your team? What might that look like? I'm open for suggestion. Right, that's exactly right, conflict. Right, so now you've got personality conflict or clashes because you go, well, they don't understand. They're always their heads in the clouds, and well, you don't get it. That I'm trying to give a concept here, and you're so stuck in the weeds that you can't see the forest for the trees. Right. Well, when we have that kind of dynamic on a team, what happens? I believe that's a violation of or that is a representation of the first dysfunction of a team, is broken trust. And how does a team work with agile values of openness, empathy, respect, courage, trust? How do you work together effectively when one of the core tenets of the team dynamic is broken? Okay, so if we understand this for what it is, my suggestion to you is maybe people that are harder to work with are actually trying to help you solve the problem, but they're coming at it in a way that isn't fun or isn't enjoyable or not your thing, but may actually add another dimension of thought to how we could bring some delightful outcome forward. So I want to break this down a little bit with a look at it. Okay, here's the iteration diamond I was looking for. This process is iterative over time. It is linear, but this is happening all the time. And so you could be clarifying and ideating and coming back to some sort of playback or some sort of reflection point to say, is this right? Do we have the right problem? Do we have a right approach? No, let's keep looking at that. Okay, I've got ideas and I will develop a few and flesh them out. Are they right? Well, let's go back and clarify. Yeah, we're in the right neighborhood. Or I could just jump right to implementation and then I'll come back later at some point when I do a showcase or a playback and decide. This is always happening all the time, and you can circle back, and we do. But here's the anatomy of creativity. It looks like this. It looks like we're always diverging, we're always converging. We're breathing in, we're breathing out. Wax on, wax off. This is always happening. And paint the fence, sand the floor. This is what's happening, right? We're thinking about it, and then we're going to do this. We're thinking about it, and then we go here, we do this. Okay, well, this happens at every single stage in this process. I can diverge on clarification and come up with all kinds of root cause analysis. It could be this, it could be that. Did you try this? I'm not necessarily ideating, but I am diverging. And then I'm going to go, okay, this is the challenge I want to work on, or this is the problem space I think we need to focus on. Okay, let's go along with ideas, and let's come down with a few and say, well, okay, what can we do with those ideas? And then, okay, and so forth. So it's just rhythmic, as rhythmic as my team wants it to be. Well, what happens when we diverge? That's where the new thinking and the new ways of seeing the problem or the solution come into play. It's going broad or going wide, if you will, on the divergence, so we can incorporate any kind of thought that might be relevant. When we converge, we can filter out, and we will filter out the things that matter and things that don't. But if I'm always working the mainstream, what's the potential for breakthrough insight? Probably less. So if we think of this as people can spend time on this, or they may not, and I'll show you kind of how that breaks down. This is a representation. This is an actual measure of somebody's preferences in these 4 areas. And so you see there's a couple that are high, and there's one that's low and one that's neutral. So when I look at this from a diverge-converge perspective, what you're seeing in 2 places, ideation and implementation, you're seeing somebody who's interested in going wide and long and deep and broad in the area. I want to really dig into what kinds of ideas could I come up with. And this person will spend a lot of time really exploring the widest edges potentially of what could be. And they'll do the same with implementing. What are all the ways I can bring it to life? So that's somebody who's really going after those areas. So they're willing to go off the beaten path and really look for new stuff. Somebody who's neutral, like I can do that, but I can take it or leave it. Okay, if they're in that neutral space, they're kind of walking that middle area, that just it's well-worn ground, and I'm just going to walk through it. I'm going to progress, and I'll do my diligence, but that's about it. Now, what happens when somebody on your team or your team dynamic says, I don't really enjoy that? So this person in particular has a low preference for developing a solution. So watch how quickly they'll run through it. Here, can I show you that again? A lot of the ground, okay, the normal path, and then boom, oh, okay. Yeah, they may pay lip service, they may say we did it, they might write a task, but it may be ambiguous, it's probably not really detail-oriented or fleshed out. And so something there will be missing because somebody didn't take the time to focus on it. Now, we're talking about preference, we're talking about energy, we're not talking about competence or ability. So if you're able to do, if you're still employed, you're probably doing all of these 4 steps to some degree. It's simply a question of, well, what happens if if I'm on your team and I'm not spending my time in one area and I'm just racing through it? What might that look like in terms of what we produce or how we collaborate? If you guys say, well, we really need to go deep on this, we really need to spend time on it, and it's not my thing, preference says this: it's not that I can't do it, it's that I probably don't want to do it. And so I'll make the time where I want to do something, not where I won't. Actions express priorities. So if I'm going really light in one area, it will probably show up somewhere later. In fact, I can pretty much guarantee you. I can even go a step further. This is a little this is a little controversial. I'm going to say a bold statement. I can tell you what kind of product this group, if this was a team profile, I can tell you what kind of product they probably will produce if they're working off of their conscious competencies, unconscious competencies only, and not aware of their unconscious incompetencies. And the green there as a low is an unconscious incompetence for this example. So far, so good? Okay, so clarification, ideation, development, implementation, universal, discrete, you do them all the time, and you have very distinct preferences. Now, I took out a slide here, but I'd ask you this just for kicks. If you'd write down for yourself, if you have Post-it notes or on a piece of paper, or mentally make a list. If you said, yeah, I think I understand these preferences and these building blocks, okay, write them down somewhere, and next to each one of them, put a high, medium, or low. I think this one really sounds like me, that's a high. This sounds not at all like me, that's a low. And, I could take it or leave it as a medium. And later what I'll ask you to do is write a chart out sort of like this. I've got a minute here to spare. Here, do it something like this.
Yeah, I was going to say people might not remember the words. There you go.
Okay. So if you did something like this for yourself, or for fun, if you did this with your team, take all the highs and put them over the top, right up parallel. Put all the highs in the right columns for each of these 4 steps. Yeah, I think these are like me, or this is like me or not. If it's low, put it on the bottom. Medium, just factor it out. It's neither here nor there. You will see that you personally have some sort of energy wave of your own. And if you take it a step further to your team and you throw these up on a wall like this somewhere, you'll see that you have innate preferences that you're expressing based on the language I've shared with you. You go, yeah, I think that's kind of like what we do, and I wonder what that means. So have you ever wondered why some of your team gets more engaged in some steps than others? This is exactly where this came from. The research for this process model came out of a creativity researcher looking at the teams he would facilitate in a creative problem-solving session. Looks a lot like a design thinking session. And he said, why is it that we're doing creative stuff and we're here to solve problems with novelty? Why is it that sometimes, at some steps and some practices in the workshop, in the process, people will just drift off? They just won't be as engaged as other times. Why is it that they kind of come and go mentally? They just check out. Well, what you're seeing is this energy wave in play. So if you look at this example, you see a decent high preference for clarification and a complete trough for ideation. And then it crests again, develop, and then it mostly drops off again at implementation. So what you're seeing is this, well, yeah, no, right? So some of it you're seeing people go wide on divergence, and some you're seeing people running right through. You're like, well, why are we always stuck in this place where we can't come up with good ideas, or we struggle to get things done? Probably because somewhere in there you've got a preponderance of people on your team that are lacking energy. If this is your chart, it's not like you're not going to hear it expressed that way. You're just going to hear people go, yeah, we did it, or no, I think we know enough. I think we got enough ideas. I think what we really need to do is flesh it out. I think we need to nail that thing down, and we need to understand it completely. That's what this particular example looks like. It says. Okay, now within this set of preferences and within this team dynamic, you'll see the same thing, the same energy wave. And so I'm going to give you a couple examples. I'm going to ask you to give me your sense of what you're seeing here. I lost. Oh, here we go. Okay. So here's what you see. I'll give you a little breakdown. You'd see pretty decent representation here for clarification, and really good representation of implementation. The ideation and the development steps in between are not bad. However, they're also countered by really significant low preferences. So this is a team that I actually measured. I think it was one of my graduate classes. What would you surmise about this team if you put it in Agile terms, or not, just in terms of how you think they'll work together and what you think their outcomes will look like?
They're probably-
Initially,
go
go ahead.
Go for it.
It just seems to me like they might be reactionary. Like they might have a good intention,
Mhm.
and then they jump right to implementation and skip kind of the planning and developing, and
Yep.
then they might have a lot of oopses on the back end.
Okay. All right. I hadn't thought of it that way. That's good.
Yeah, my sense is they'd be tripping all over each other as they're all ready to implement. And they're probably frustrated with one another because they didn't come to consensus on what it is they want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? You're right. There could be a bit of reactionary aspect to this because it's a very time sensitive focused team.
Mhm.
Everything will filter through the lens of, yeah, but we don't have time for that. We've got to get stuff done.
Right.
You may not hear we don't have time. You'll hear we got to get this done.
Yeah.
So there will probably always be a sense of urgency to move, to produce, to
Mhm.
drive things to closure. None of that's good or bad. In fact, that's a really good thing if you're on a team in an organization that really needs to get things done. So you would expect that. You'd look for that, right? In fact, there's a good deal of theory around leadership hiring or attracting its own kind, and not even thinking necessarily like I need somebody who gets things done. They just go, wow, they seem like a go-getter. I want that person on my team. So there's even an unconscious bias towards how I might staff my team because of that. The other unconscious bias here looks like I'm going to spend a decent amount of time relative to the time constraint of implementation with understanding the problem space. Now it's a little fuzzy to tell you this statistically, but what I will tell you is that it looks like these two are the preferences because they're also fewer low preferences. So you could look at these as kind of bookends. I'm going to spend a decent amount of time clarifying a problem, and then I'm going to spend a really decent amount of time, or most of my time, driving that problem space to closure, finding the problem, closing on it. Now, if this is a goal-oriented approach as a team, it could be it'd be like a pace-setting leadership style. It's great. We're going to hold you to this level of excellence, and you're going to get things done. But a couple things are going to happen. One, you're not going to see a lot of quality based on the low the low number of high preference for development and the high number of low preference. You're not going to see a lot of quality here. You may see a lot of things done. You may see a really good goal orientation. That's great. But if it is, as Joel said, it's kind of reactionary, it can reduce itself. This preference, especially this one, looks a lot like every problem is a nail and my solution set is a hammer. So I haven't put a lot of thought into novelty, and I definitely haven't put a lot of thought into quality or sustainability. So what I know is this: the nail was hanging out of the wall, and now it's not, or now it's not. Really great illustration of this is the movie Lethal Weapon, when Mel Gibson is on the roof with a jumper, with a guy who wants to jump off the building and commit suicide. And finally, he gets frustrated with the guy and says, "Do you really want to jump? Let's go." And the guy doesn't know there's the thing at the bottom, the inflatable thing that they can fall into. And his partner is furious with him, livid. And he says, "What were you thinking?" He said, "You wanted him down? He's down. I got the job done." That is very much a clarification plus implementation kind of mindset. This is the problem. I took care of it. Yeah, but you didn't do it like this. You didn't think about the cost. You didn't think about the ramifications. You could have, that's kind of what this looks like. This one's an extreme, but it's a fun illustration. How about this one? This is high preference for ideation, high preference for implementation, very low preference for development, and pretty low for clarification. Go ahead, somebody. Be brave.
Yeah, it's basically just creating something that, or not really solving the problem per se, just to do the work, right?
Yeah. And maybe not solving the problem, but how many ways am I not solving it? If I'm going to spend a lot of time ideating, it means I'm coming up with a lot of ideas. And for this particular preference profile, it's called a driver. The other one was called an accelerator. Let's get up to speed, man. This one is, I'm going to throw a lot. So an accelerator, the previous, so this one is, I have one good idea. This one says I have many good ideas. So they're very much the same on the back end. Get it done. But now it's not just one idea, it's a lot of plates spinning. And so who knows how many are going to get driven to closure, because I may come up with new ones. And who knows to what degree the thing was worth doing, because look at the low clarification. It's, I might be basing the idea and the solution out of an assumption rather than fact or data. And it will not be sustainable based on that low development preference. Somebody's not looking at details, they're looking at quantity. Neither good nor bad. If you're a team that does prototyping, just fashion it, wire hang it, frame it, get it out there, let's see. Great. Then you're in an excellent team to do that. But if you're building rock solid solutions for somebody, you're probably doing a lot of rework, or you're being asked to try something new every single time because the last thing didn't work. And if this was your boss, that one didn't work, go find another way to do it. Great, I can come up with more ideas and throw more ideas at it, but they're still not necessarily going to solve the problem. Okay, next one. Driven by ideas and by clarity. What else do you see? Yeah, a lot of this kind of, I'm just going to spend a lot of time here on the front end. In fact, this one's called an early bird. I'm going to spend a lot of time finding the right problem, or a little bit more, I'm going to find the right ideas and then make sure they fit the problem. But either way, I'm going to refine the problem space and the potential way to solve the problem. Maybe too long. What's not going to happen here?
Action.
Yeah, and?
Shipping.
I'm not going to ship. And what I do ship, what can we say about it, do you think? The product, the outcome?
Half-baked.
Yeah, that's baked.
Wow, was it worth it? Now, if I'm feeding a pipeline and somebody else is going to go do the work and flesh it out, great. Then this is a good team to have. So maybe this is the marketing team, or this is the research team, or somebody that's looking at, well, what do the customers really need or want? Great. If I can feed that into another team, fantastic. Now, interesting story. This was my team for a couple of years here in CIO at IBM. My team didn't write code, but we came up with all the requirements, and we were dealing with the people in the field who needed what we were providing. But this was the team who was developing the code for us. So I meant to put these side by side. Okay, so I'm driving ideas all day long and trying to close them. But the team I'm relying on to actually provide the technology solution, they're spending all this time doing this. Yeah, we got a problem. We'll refine it. We got an idea. We'll refine it. We got an idea. We'll refine it. Somebody once, I explained the dynamic, and they said, oh, fear of commitment. Well, okay, you're right. Every one of these sets of dynamic profiles, there is some gotcha. There is some blind spot that's a fear of something or an aversion to something. This one is, I'm averse to actually moving forward because I want to make sure I've got the right problem space. This team here, the high ideation, high implementation, they are process averse. I will do the job, but don't ask me to stay to color within the lines.
Em consideração a individualidade, né? Tipo, criança que não come pão, ela leva o quê?
I totally agree with you, Coca. Thank you. I'm spending a lot of time here coming up with stuff, but don't ask me to structure it or frame it the way you want it. I'm going to go and figure it out myself. This is the driver is the think outside of the box profile. The early bird is when I'm comfortable giving you something, I will, but don't wait on me. And so we really struggled, and it became a personality clash. It was really not an enjoyable time for us because we had one point of inflection that was good, and it was they've got ideas and we got ideas, but then either we can't move them forward or they don't want to release them, and so it can get really. The awareness is good. Now, what do you do with it? We go back to shared understanding. Final one. This is tricky. High preference for clarification, high preference for ideation, healthy preference for development, and also an equally low preference for development and no preference for implementation. What do you think happens here on this team?
Ran out of money.
And what did they have to show for it?
Nothing.
Well,
Nothing.
really, really good plans, maybe. Really good blueprints. You know, a solid, okay, I've made this statement inside IBM. The number one, we've been number one on the patents issued list for over 20 years. This is the invention profile, in a sense, right here. I know the problem space really well. I have a novel solution for it, or a set of novel approaches to it. I've fleshed out some of those novel approaches into something that is workable, that solves the problem in a really elegant, novel, delightful way. But it never comes off paper. Neither good nor bad, but this is called the hare, like the rabbit, like the hare and the tortoise. Like you gotta finish the race. Well, with this profile, it's not likely much is getting produced that I can say, see, it's tangible, it's done. But I've got a really elegant solution waiting for you to pick up. So who do I want to take this and run with it? Probably these guys. Maybe these guys. You know, the accelerator, you know, clarification and implementation, that might be really good here because I've spent all the time clarifying it for you. I've got the novelty, I've got the sustainability and quality. I just need you to pick it up and say, this is a task I need to do. In or out, good, let's go. And I run with it, and I run with it. So if I can refine this level profile, and I pick up somebody who's got a task orientation, like clarification implementation, we might have something special here.
Yeah.
But what happens if I don't move with it? I've got really good plans. Turns out that's my profile. That's my set of preferences. Now, I'm doing it a little injustice because there's an equal number of low preferences here as high. This was another one of my classes. But you could see that, you know, it's either an early bird or it's an early bird with quality. I've spent time really focusing on it. Now, I fleshed it out, but what will you do with it? So these are just some examples of ways in which a team may function. And your team probably has a similar dynamic. And I'd welcome a conversation later if you wanted in Twitter or LinkedIn or somewhere, email. How did it look when you posted this on the wall with your team and charted it? And what did you find out? So what do you do here? Now that we know this, we have shared understanding. We know there's a process that we can apply for deliberate, innovative outcomes, novelty, and we have a sense of how our team dynamic works against that process. How do you build a team to break through at that point? Well, we're talking about preferences. We've just expressed a preference, energy level, an unconscious competence or an unconscious incompetence. Energies live there somewhere. You need to know what they are to know how to leverage them. But it doesn't mean people won't get stuff done or can't do the parts that are missing or appear to be missing. I'm still getting stuff done even though it's not my passion to drive stuff to closure, but I'm still doing stuff because there is a constraint, there is a context in which we work that requires me to have an ability to do it, and so I do it. But man, if I can hand off to somebody or I can partner with somebody, even better. So if I know on my team, as somebody without a high energy preference implementing stuff, but if I know I have somebody on my team who is that energetic or in my organization, I'm going to seek them out. I'm going to spend a little time talking to them. What would you do here? How would you approach this? Could you help me? Do you want to take it off my hands? But mostly what I'll do with a team is I'll make sure that I'm not the weak link. And if I know we're a performance-oriented team, I will work early and often ahead of my team or anticipating what they need so that I'm not holding up progress. But if I know what my team's preferences might be or where they might function in this, it opens up a whole new way to work that problem or bring that solution to bear. So we're talking preference, we're not talking ability. I would never hire a team based on their preference or build exclusively on preference. What I would do is staff like you normally do for the skills that you need and the knowledge that's appropriate for the context of your team. But then I would use preferences like this, even if it's just your kind of gut. Yeah, I think they bring a quality dimension to this I haven't seen on the rest of our team that we really need. Jerry Hirschberg in the Creative Priorities said he would pair hirings, so they were not the same. They were different than one another in a like a foil to one another. So he was thinking about this without necessarily expressing it at this level, at this granular level of, let me bring in one guy who's really intuitive and conceptual. Let me bring in one who's really facts and figures, and one who really moves things, and one who needs to spend time fleshing stuff out. Great. Hire for skill and knowledge, and then staff for preference. And then finally, look at the gaps in your team as an opportunity for continuous learning. Look at it as a way to build a competence where you don't have one now. These do soft map to the Agile practices. And I can show you that offline, maybe with something Heidi can send out. You can map this just enough to go, okay, if we're missing quality, maybe we need to spend more time fleshing out the idea into something workable. If we're not clear on something, maybe we need to go back and do some, in design thinking terms, some empathy mapping or some discovery on what's missing. So you can find it in there. So questions before I recap? Love to hear your insights.
Hey, Isaac, there's some questions on the Slido board. Do you want to ask them?
Yep, absolutely. I'll give you the top one there. We had one that had 4 upvotes, and it was, what would you do if team members do not believe in their purpose? Back when you were talking about getting a kind of standard purpose,
Yeah.
why here? How would you handle that?
Yeah, I think you've got to be very clear on why are we here, and then you've got to be very clear on, well, how are we going to work together to get there? And I don't mean to drop the specter of the manager coming in and saying it, but somebody's paying you to do something for a reason. How do you align to that in a way that brings your passion with it? But I don't know how you work as a team effectively if you don't know why you're all there and what is expected of you. And I really don't know how you get along or get anything done if team members don't want to be part of it.
Cool. So another question for you. So if you discover that your team is heavily weighted to one type, how do you smooth out the missing elements? What are some ways that you can fill those gaps? You know, this is a light bulb moment for someone and they go, oh man, we have high this and high this, really low this. Short of hiring the balancing factors, are there some ways they can smooth that?
Yeah, there's a lot of excellent tools available, some of which I've started to write up on my site, which you see on the screen, my website. I'm starting to write up some tutorials on some of these ways you can approach challenges differently. Mostly, you just need to spend time with somebody that's focusing on the area you're not, or look for people who are expressing the preference that you're missing and ask them to come in and consult or throw some questions by them. How would you do it? Listen, we really need to build out the quality on this, but we're not sure how. Can you give us some techniques or some tips on how to approach it? And what I will send Heidi to send out to all of you is a little bit of verbal cues that you can listen for, so you can hear preferences being expressed in the wild. And when you hear them, you know, well, okay, this is where they're probably coming from. And then I can map that back to my own practices and the techniques and methods we use in our Scrum sprints and iterations that speak to that. So I can show you where you can go, here's the energy that's missing, here's the area where it's going to be affected. What tools do we need to bring to bear that we would normally use? There are practices. How do we coach for that?
Awesome. Let me slide one more in here and then I'll let you wrap up our session. How can you surface your team's propensity to the clarify, ideate, develop, implement at various phases in order to have a discussion to keep the work moving forward?
Yeah. I would say probably at every phase where you see that there could be a change or a different set of preferences being expressed, do some sort of retrospective there. Do some sort of mood marble. How did that work for you? What's missing? Fist to 5. How good was what we just did? Well, why wasn't it? See, the techniques aren't any different. It's just you're listening for something different. Oh, okay, you weren't energized by that because, oh, okay. Or you'll hear it in the language. Yeah, it's just so intensive to have to work it through or spend the time. We don't have the time to flesh that thing out. Okay. Oh, we have an imbalance here. How do we make time, or how do we build time in? So I would just take a temperature at those logical breakpoints and figure out what worked and what didn't.
Great.
Cool. Thank you. So the recap is, oops, I went the wrong way. Always strive for shared understanding. That's an ongoing process. That's a daily renewal of why are we here? How are we going to work together today? Understand that there is a process available to you to be deliberate in how you approach a challenge that will bring out delightful, novel outcomes if you work it. My last best professor in my master's program where I learned all this said, trust the process, and remember, process is a cruel mistress. So the process will work for you, and you just got to learn how to. We're in a shoe moment here. We're just learning what the process model looks like. Go out and play with it. Do some and see what works and what doesn't. Understand that your team members have different energy levels for that process, and they will express them, and they are expressing them all the time, and you might be the one with the blind spot. So be careful of that too. So final thing just for you, ask you to just quickly, the 3 keys is a no-brainer than the 3 things you learned, but think of 3 things you learned here today that just really stood out, 2 you don't want to forget, 1 that you just want to go work on right now. Just go do something with right now, just so you don't forget, because I'm a non-implementation preference. So I'm going to skip this and go, yeah, I'll get back to it. And then I won't, because my energy just went somewhere else. So this is how you can reach me. I'm more than happy to talk on Twitter, LinkedIn, email. I haven't got any comments on my site yet because I just kind of started getting it off the ground, but you're welcome to comment or get in touch with me. Love to have a continued conversation. A side note, I met Heidi and Lori and Isaac through the Modern Agile community, and I am in that Slack community. I strongly recommend it. The 4 tenets of Modern Agile play very well with the model, with the elements of breakthrough thinking, and you can always find me there online. I am a Skype freak, Slack freak, not Skype. So you're welcome to find me there too. So thank you very much for your time.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mike. Oh, yeah.
A couple reference links. I'm only telling you this so you're aware, because I mentioned that there is a measure. I don't get any money for the measure, but there is a cost for it. Not asking you to take it or telling you have to. The model works all by itself. But if you want to take the measure at that site and pay for it, I don't get any money for it. I'm happy to debrief you and help you understand your preferences. And a really great shared understanding tool is Mural. We use it a lot inside IBM, and I love it. And it is a great tool for design thinking and for discovery, and you can do very high-level funnel management with it too.
That's awesome.
Great.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Cool. And Heidi, if you, or Mike, if you could stop sharing for a second, I'm just going to throw one thing up there. I'll point everybody back to coachingagilejourneys.com, our website. I've got up our next event coming up. We've got Jeff Kors, one of our own. It's going to be speaking on user experience inside of Agile. It's going to be December 11th. It's going to be what we consider a bonus session. We're going to be taking the official month of December off, and we'll be publishing our first quarter. Kind of here's the speakers we're looking at doing next year. So be looking for that over the holidays. But this will be the last official one, but we're going to throw in Jeff as a bonus. So do come join us for Jeff if you can, December 11th. Otherwise, we'll see you guys in the new year as we start out a new webinar series. So coachingagilejourneys.com. You can sign up there, keep an eye out for events that we have coming up. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Heidi, anything else before we close?
Thank you. Just one thing. So that one is actually a lunch and learn session at 11 a.m. Eastern. And so hopefully some of the folks in other time zones will be able to join us as it's more convenient for them. So it will be 11 a.m. Eastern time. Pass it on, and we'll of course be posting on social media. Thank you so much, everybody, for staying on. Awesome session. And we'll be posting the recording very shortly.
Thank you very much.
Everyone have a great rest of your week.